In Truth and in Spirit World of Worship Fellowship, or iTiS World of Worship Fellowship. Today is the 9th of April, 2026. Today is Thursday. And as usual, we have an online fellowship on Zoom. So if you're listening to this recording, you can always join us on Zoom. We prefer to have you live to ask questions, to comment, to disagree, to agree, and so on and so forth. You can always join us. Otherwise, if you can't join us, you can always go to our YouTube channel, iTiS World of Worship Fellowship. We always upload all these recordings there. And you can always, of course, we want your feedback. So comment, ask questions. We'll be happy to attempt them. Okay. So today being Thursday, we have what we call a catch up, but this catch up is kind of special because it's a it's a topical discussion on theology, which is, I think, our favorite subject here. Everything we discuss here is in the lens of God because we are believers, we are Christians, we are theists. Okay. That alone is a pregnant statement. When I say we are believers in a God, we are theists, those are already the claims I'm making, okay? And today, we're here to break down this topic. Or should I say attempt? Because it's a very big topic. Like we always say, theology is the study of God. And when you're studying a subject as big as God, you can never really start and end. So what you can do is just attempt. And then, of course, it's a revelation. It's a continuous revelation, progressive revelation, as we call it. Yeah, and then of course, God, even outside this Zoom or this discussion, continues to reveal himself through nature, through that education you're getting in school, through your work, your interactions, and so on and so forth. Okay? So today we're tackling a very big topic, and God have mercy on us. The topic is God. This is just part one. We'll probably have part 2 and 3, depending on your feedback or any questions that arise. All right? So this big animal called God, who is God or what is God? All right. That is very important, by the way. For some people, God is a who. For others, God is a what. Okay. There are those who say earth, or is it the universe, is God. So you hear statements like, the universe will conspire and give it to you. All right. There are those who think nature or reality is God. There are those who say science is God. But is that what we mean, at least in our context? Okay. So who or what is God is the first question we are going to tackle. And then most important, is it a being or is it just a concept? Okay. Most importantly, when you're discussing the Christian God, because like I said, we are Christians here, how is this Christian God different from other deities or gods in various traditions? Because throughout history, every tradition has a set of gods. I come from the central part of Uganda, from Buganda. We have the Musokes, the Chwanukas, the Dungus, Gweza Wamukasa, when they are twins, they're all these gods. But the Baganda have the central one, or a bit of a hierarchy. There's that other god who's above these ones. Okay. So what we need to understand is, how is that God different from the Christian God? Okay. So many cultures have gods. Actually, many in this generation now, there's a movement back to traditionalism. There are those who argue Christianity or all these other religions are from the West. Okay, they say Islam is from the Arabs. Christianity, as they call it, is from the white man. Okay, that's part of colonialism. Let's go back to our original gods. We had God here before these guys came. So there's a whole argument about that. So welcome aboard. That is what we're going to be discussing today. So who should I start with? Isaiah.
We should start with Tom because he had those questions which would be more direct than your.
Okay, mine are a bit too conceptual. Tom, do you want to come in with your set of questions? I know you sent an audio about this whole thing of God. So can you just add on to my introduction?
Yes, kubanga traditionally here in Africa, specifically in Teso and in Buganda, we have what we call the creator above all the deities, and then there are those other deities below the creator. Africans believe, at least the Baganda and the iTiS, with whom I have interacted traditionally, they believe there is a supreme being at the top. Then there are other intermediaries between that supreme being and humanity. Locally in Buganda here, those intermediaries are called Varubale. Now, in Luganda, Rubale is not God, is not Katonda. Katonda is the creator, but then there are Rubales between God and humanity. These Rubales are autonomous. They may decide on a punishment. They may decide on how to reward you. They may decide on what to do with an errant human being or a human being who is compliant. When you read parts of the Bible, parts of the Quran, and I think parts of the Bhagavad Gita, those are the books I have interacted with, you realize that in the Bible, the behaviors of Rubare here are attributed to the behaviors of God, the Creator, in the Bible. So the questions are: who is God? What is God? How do we differentiate? How do we pick out? How do we identify God amidst the rurales surrounding us? That is the question, moderator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom, for those additional questions. Yeah, so his direct question is, how do you differentiate this God amongst the multitude of these other gods? Okay. Actually, let me also add that some people argue, no, we all worship the same God, but we understand him differently, okay? Because God is this big animal, you can never totally understand him. Some people are touching the tail, others are touching the ears and so on and so forth. So there's also that argument. But the question we're here to answer is, how distinct is the Christian God? Because like I said, we're a Christian fellowship. So we have a claim that our God is the ultimate God. Maybe you can start. Let's go back to the Christian God, Isaiah. Who is the Christian God, or what is the Christian God?
I think, thank you.
Is
Thank you.
it a who or a what? Or we shall find out as we go along.
You'll have to excuse me for the coffee, etc. But thank you, everyone. Praise God. And I don't know now what I mean by that, because now the discussion is about the one that we are praising. So I don't know who or what we are praising for that matter. And this debate is so huge. I'm not sure we will finish it today, but we are going to attempt whatever that we can here. We will be using two languages, so Luganda will also be welcome, and English also, but mainly English. So the question is, who or what is God? And when we ask who or what, we are asking, is God a being, or therefore who is that being? Or is God a concept? Therefore, what is that God? And I think that is where we begin from. Before we even go to the Christian God, I know we will later delve into that Christian God, but because the people that we speak to do not all subscribe to Christianity, I think it is important that we we be patient with the tuning to that. I know we're a Christian fellowship, yes, but we have to make our case before those who do not subscribe to our school of thought, or at least our worldview, for that matter. So when you ask who is God, you're asking whether he's a being or or not. And then when you ask, what is God? You're asking whether he's just a concept or whatever, because there are people, there are schools of thought. So there are basically two ways to think around God. I don't want to say that to think about God, but there are two ways to think around God. And even before I forget, for people who make a claim that we all worship one God, but we understand him differently, normally my question is, when you understand something differently, do you understand the same thing? So, it is technically a contradiction to say that we worship the same God. We just only understand him differently. Really, you cannot say that, you cannot have same and different in the same sentence, but with the same object. It is a contradiction. So these understandings that you see, they are not mere understandings. These are positions that actually create conclusions. And with those conclusions, that's how we come up with God. For example, you cannot tell Muslims, I see my Islam friend is here, Sharif Muanguzi. You won't tell Muslims that we Christians worship the same God with the Muslims. It's going to be very difficult because Allah and the Trinitarians, the Tangazo, ah, you can't tell me that a Trinity is just an understanding and Allah is just an understanding of the same thing. It really becomes very difficult there to defend. So these understandings are very important, and that's why we normally meet here so that we can have these discussions around these various topics. So,
Yeah, Pastor.
mm,
For purposes of clarity and distinction, maybe when we say Christian God, are we admitting that there are more than one God? Because when you look at the African traditional religion as by the Baganda believe there is Katonda below, and that Katonda is one. They don't believe there are many Katondas. No. They believe there is one Katonda. But below that one Katonda, there are many Rubares. Now, when I say Katonda, I mean creator. And when you say God, you mean anything, any entity that can be worshipped. So the question is about Katonda, the creator, as by the Baganda, not God Rubale. Thank you.
now, again, we need to go back there. Samson, you're welcome. Again, we need to go back. Samson, you should just go and join this Zoom, because for you, you can access the links. Jethro, you send the Zoom link to Samson, because I see him here on TikTok, and yet he would be useful here on the Zoom directly. Now, Brother Young, creator, translated or loosely translated as Katonda. Okay, is what God does. It is not who God is. And what we are dealing with here, we are dealing with is what or who he is. We're not dealing with what he does. So normally when the Baganda say Katonda, 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 of course, most of us, when we're even calling God himself, we say Katonda, Katonda, Katonda. But we are uttering a profession. What God does, he's a creator, God the creator. So to answer even your question directly, are there more gods? Yes, there are many gods by perception. There are many gods. And it is, of course, heavy on me as a Christian to say that to acknowledge that there are many gods, but by perception, there are many gods. Like I've just told you, you will not convince the Muslims that the Trinitarian God is the same as Allah. It's not. Therefore, the argument that we worship the same God only with different understandings does not stand. It is actually even contradictory. But anyway, moderator, me, I wanted to go to the part of the two aspects of understanding what or who God is. So
Yes.
the question is he a being or is he a concept? Because when we say that we worship the same God, we only understand him differently. Then you are saying that God is a concept that we have perceived differently. In other words, you are not saying who God is, you are saying what God is. So God is just a concept. And that's why we have just understood him differently. I guess that is one of the problems. So to start off, and I'll give way to other speakers. God as a being, we say that this being is a person existing entity, which is a causal power. The uncaused cause of everything. So that I think it was Anselm who said that that being than which nothing greater can be conceived, necessarily existing, maximally powerful, omniscient, perfectly good. So God is not merely an idea, but the ground of all being, the uncaused cause that explains why anything exists. So that is the beingness. However, the problem with understanding God as a being is that uh, it it justifies the atheist question that says, "Does God exist?" Because when atheists ask, "Does God exist?" they are they are deducing God into a creature that exists like we exist. Therefore, does he exist like exists? Now, the theological response to that question normally is yes, God exists. But I want you to understand what we Christians mean when we say that God exists. We are not saying that he exists like any other creature. No. When we say that God exists, we are saying that God is the existence itself. So when we say that God is a being, we are not putting him at our level of our beingness, but God is being itself. So who is God? God is being itself, because there is no being without that initial, the uncaused being, who is God. Who is God? Does that make sense? So now we are talking about God. We are not talking about your gods.
Let me ask a question. So when you say God is the uncaused cause,
Yes.
are you saying it really? Of course, Christians would say the beginning, maybe, but because when you try to deduce life as it is today, how it started, how it probably started, there's always something at the beginning of that. Last week, you remember discussing with our brother Kato. Even the agreed that the laws of physics were present at the
Yeah.
start for life to come into being as we know it today. So, are you saying that beginning, for lack of a better word, is what we call God?
So we would say that because you see Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 is very communicative, because it says that in the beginning God, therefore there was God before the beginning.
Well, someone would argue that is according to your holy book. So, for someone who doesn't believe in your holy book, what would you say?
Okay, let me leave the holy book and I go back and I come back here to this. Now, okay, let's put aside the Bible, because I know the Bible offends many of us here. And we need to use it as a textbook before we even stereotype it as a religious book. But anyway, let us excuse it for now, even though it will keep coming. But for now, they cannot be beingness out of unbeing.
What do you mean?
What I mean is that,
agende mpola awo.
what I mean is this, that if scientists argue that there were laws of nature and these laws of nature are intelligible, are we together?
Mm.
which determined existence as we see it, and all the knowledge and the science that we appreciate today. You cannot convince any rational being that those intelligible laws of nature came out of an intelligence, if that is English. So, in other words, something cannot come out of nothing. One, two, intelligence cannot come out of foolishness, or in the absence of intelligence, intelligence was born. So, in other words, if you argue that there is being, because we agree that there is being, we are human beings, they are animal beings, they are nature being, great. So you cannot argue that that beingness came out of not being. In other words, non-living things, the argument, the science of abiogenesis, non-living things gave birth to living organisms. That is impossible. Are you guys following? Fine. So this being, for those of us who argue that who argue God as a being, we are arguing that this is the uncaused being that causes all beingness in our history, at least to the extent that we know. And this being is intelligible. This being is uncaused, unlike other beings. So that is God as a being for you. But there are those who argue that.
Go on.
There are those who argue that God is a concept. And I'd like to make a few comments on those who argue that God is a concept, because and I think they argue that it is a human construction. God is just a concept that human beings came up with, that at least points to the ultimate values, so that you can have social cohesion, and then at the end of the day, existential meaning. So that is why we have this whole thing known as God. God is that concept. It's not real, but it's just that concept that manages society. It gives the hopeless hope, and what? It's just that concept. So, and various people have perceived that concept differently from various cultures and traditions. And there's a justification for that. For example, in polytheism, many gods, they are literally a god assigned to any task and any challenge in that community. So whenever they have a challenge, they come up with a god for that challenge. Whenever they have a challenge, they come up with a god for that challenge. So that is God as a concept. And that is where this whole idea of fenatusinza katonda y'omu just tumutegera mu ngeri ya njawulo comes up actually. That is qualifying God as a concept. So there's the concept of Allah, there's the concept of Yahweh, Allah in Islam, the concept of Yahweh in Judaism. I think Jesus also qualifies for Christendom, and then, etc. It goes like that. So how you perceive that, it is, and what that concept actually helps sort out in your community, at least that community that has perceived that God, God as a concept. But there are challenges to that. For example, why are people searching for meaning if there is no an absolute meaning? Why are they still searching for that?
Well,
Because
some say life is meaningless. So
yes, people say that life is meaningless. Yes, but why haven't human beings gave up on searching for meaning?
last
And
week
why
they even went to the moon.
Yes, and why have they qualified particular concepts as meaning? A Muslim has found meaning in Allah. A Hindu has found a meaning in Bhagavad. I have forgotten their gods. And a Jew finds meaning in Yahweh, and even these religions find their meanings in this whole Jesus Christ and their Trinity. Why haven't human beings gave up on digging for that meaning, and why do they even keep switching places? I was a Muslim, I converted to Hinduism. I was Hindu, I converted to Judaism, etc. Now, that unceasing search of meaning communicates something about our perception of God as a concept. That there could be something bigger than what we have perceived and what we have actually philosophized or theorized. There could be something, and that something is not only just a concept, but a tangible being in nature. So moderator, for me, that's why I want to come in and introduce this whole thing. Then when I go back to Ariong as I leave you guys, the Bakatonda, Barubare, what Tom needs to understand is that Bakatonda, like for instance in Buganda, let me use the Buganda culture. In the Buganda religion, okay, where the Kabaka is the high priest, or at least is the first son of the gods. In the Buganda religion, all those gods, okay, have their functions and their roles. It is some sort of polytheism and pantheism. They have their functions. Barubale balina omugaso era kye bakola. Then emisambwa, which is equivalent to your Bible angels, girina omugaso. Then ne bano abalala. Does Mukasa and Musoke qualify as Barubale in Buganda?
Yes. Mukasa and Musoke, Chibuka, all those are Rubales.
Now,
Angels,
those Barubales are functional gods or functional agents of the gods. Era you find omu akola ku nnyanja, omulala akola mu by'okuyiga.
Abo si bajjajja.
Bajjajja ate
nedda bajjajja balala.
Bajjajja are deceased ancestors. Abo nabo balina omugaso. And all cultures were doing that. Even Judaism. Judaism is actually structured like the Buganda religion. When you read the Old Testament, you'll find all those things there. Now, however, the Baganda, they have that God who is called Muwanga. And they also have that unknown God.
Acts 17.
So the rankings in that pantheon is very important because it is pointing you to what I think Psalms, Mwanganye Bible, Psalms I think 80, that God
Please
sits.
read the holy
Psalms
book.
I think Psalms 80 or 80 something.
Psalms 82.
I think that is Psalms 80.
Where God has a council of gods in heaven and they are discussing.
And he sits in the league of the gods. Okay, so what you see in Psalms 82 is what is happening in your African traditional regions and even other cultures around the globe. But all of that is a journey of the revelation of this supreme God. And I guess that is why we are here, to find out who he is or actually what he is. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you, Isaiah. Thank you for joining us, everybody. I see my brother Biamukama, my brother Samson, and everybody. We're happy to have you. This is In Truth and in Spiritual Worship Fellowship. Today we are discussing a very, very huge concept called God, or being, as we have understood. Yeah, if you like to participate, there are two ways. You can raise your hand, electronic hand, if you know where that is, or you can type in the chat, or if you have no background noise, you can just unmute and come in. Let me just read some comments from the chat. I think Biamukam was reacting to Tom's Ariong submission. I think the Baganda would see the Balubale as guardians. I know some who would object to calling them gods. I think that was a reaction to Ariong's submission. And then Samson Kasumba says, you should not imagine God from the context of humans. I want to find a way out of which it is possible to produce order from chaos. Okay, that was reference to the earlier thing of abiogenesis, I think. And then finally, he said, we need faith to understand and comprehend God. We also need to understand that there's absolutely no way we can fit a subject or an infinite concept being as large as God into the narrow limits and finite circumstances of human understanding. Okay, that is Samson's submission. So who'd like to go next? Just raise your hand or unmute if you have no background noise. Or I pick. Okay. I pick. Let me hear from Biamukama first. If you can talk, usually he can't talk. He just types in the chat. Biamukama, can you talk?
Oh, usually I want to hear the submissions of others, and I was enjoying what my brother was saying. Perhaps, and I joined a bit late, but perhaps to reinforce a bit of what I was mentioning. So there is a good author that I like called Ron Highfield, and he mentions how he draws our attention to the sort of prevalent, at least ancient conception of the gods that was quite prevalent with the Greeks and the Romans, and maybe you could argue as well the ancient Near Eastern cultures, the Hittites and Babylonians and all that. The concept or the thinking in which the sense in which God or the gods is sort of like an abstract idea or thought, so to speak, or which is, you could say, other beings partake of, and those who partake of that essence or that sort of like material that is divine become gods in that way, which is why within the Greek mythologies, the heroes could be elevated to the place of the gods, and which is why the conception of the gods in Greek mythology, if you read Homer and Hesiod and the rest, you will begin to see that actually they are sort of deified humans, and that understanding and idea can be quite prevalent even in our modern context. I mean, you find people who say they are gods and stuff like that. They would be perceiving of God as if this is sort of like a liquid or a primordial soup that one can participate in or partake and be elevated to the place of godhood, which is then completely different from the Christian, the biblical idea or teaching concerning God. God is, and as Mutawaz was trying to say, is the ground of all beings. And even when you would call him a being, you would have to say that he is a being unlike any other, in the sense that you can speak of his being analogously in that sense. And so there are continuities and discontinuities. He is the very ground, the very essence, the very reason why everything else exists. But I just wanted to chime into how it tends to be the case that when people think about God, they are thinking about a sort of divine essence that other beings can tap into, partake of, and in that sense be deified in that regard, which is not the case with the biblical concept, where God is unlike any other, and therefore there is a gulf, so to speak, an ontological, by that meaning the very nature of being. There is that ontological gap that cannot be bridged between him and everything else that exists.
Thank you, Biamukama. Samson, my brother, your hand is up. Please unmute, and you're going to start with Chris's question. Samson, you can't say we can't fit a subject hard to understand into the human mind, yet to teach God all the time for humans to understand him with their mind. Are you saying you're wasting time since the human mind can't understand God? Or are you just diverting us from the core question? Samson, what would be your response to that? Please.
A very good evening to everybody, and I am glad to be here. Perhaps at some point you will repeat the question so that I can get the grips of it. But you see, first of all, I would like to demystify the Bible from a book and call it a collection of stories of the finite understanding of experiences of those before us, trying to come to grips with this concept of God. By concept, I'm just using concept because I'm trying to use concept because I'm trying to paint a picture of of what we are dealing with when we speak about God. You cannot divorce God from faith, because to come to God, whether small g or big G, you begin with faith. The people who believe in Chiwanuka, who believe in Buddha, who believe in whatever it is, have never seen these individuals, but they believe that they are there. So whichever your understanding of God, you have to construct that being or concept from a place of faith. The idea that what I believe to be God exists. Now, our understanding of God, the rest of us, comes from a place that, one, we are dealing with a being way bigger and larger than who we are, and our finite minds can capture. Now, that's difficult. You see, when you have a beginning like you and I have as human beings, it is difficult to grasp the idea that there is a being devoid of a beginning. Because our understanding of phenomena is in relation to who we are, because we have a starting point. If you want to blow up your mind, actually, each time you talk about God, in trying to understand not having a being as a concept related to God, we think of him as having a beginning, but one that is very...
I've lost him. Am I alone?
No, we can't hear him.
Okay.
katusubira akasimu tebakanyaza
I guess
mu Kampala.
So are you still there? Okay. We can't hear you, unfortunately. Maybe I can go over to Tangazo. He'll come back and complete his submission. Tangazo, we're dealing with this big animal. Who is God or what is God? What would you say?
Well, thanks. Good evening to everyone. This is an important subject to discuss, especially if we are to even make an attempt at, for example, what Christians claim to respond to whatever this being is or has said. And I think where Samson was getting to, he had alluded to the fact that whether you believe in this one we are discussing or any other we might be implying, you inevitably have an obligation. If anything is true about this God, then it has implications on how we respond to whatever it is. And so it's an important discussion. That's what I'm trying to say. So I think Wodam Luganda, and I agree with the fact that we are using Luganda as well. Tebakulya ekikumi tubali tumalina akasimu bwakabbi ssebo naye kasita okomyewo oyo nno kasumba mukulu wange temunkubya miggo bannaye.
Ate obio. Continue please, Tangazo.
Nakati, when it comes to Katonda, in language, and of course many of you will have a bit of knowledge about etymology of words as such. It's to call God Katonda is coming to a conclusion that you're saying the one who created, that one we call him Katonda. You know, when you explain to a Muganda what you mean by God in English, what they perceive is you're describing the great one who created. Should you have come and told the Muganda that you have a deity that makes rain or a deity that is in charge of fertility, they would never have said Katonda. They would probably have referred to that particular being. I think who is that? Dungu abeera ya yakwasaganya ekya fertility ne productivity.
Kasai wa twins bw'ogamba bweza bwa
Mukasa
Mukasa.
ndowooza bweza bwa Mukasa. Bweza bwa Mukasa. Because if you, when you describe that being or that existence that is transcendent, that is out of space and time, that potentially is the cause of all other existence, you're going to, even if you go among the Karimojong, the Karimojong will call that Akuj. Not because what you've described is Akuj, but because what you've described is attributed to Akuj. And I hope I'm understood by what I mean. What there is, what you for example, when you say that for example, as a gospel preacher, when you describe God as the creator of the heavens and earth, the invisible one, the one who is out of space and time. The Karimojong,
Akuju is up and above.
That's what I'm saying, sir. But not on, he's up and above all the others. He's not just there chilling. So the up and above is more of a location, but also a posture of he's above us. He's not like us. Which I mean, I may be wrong, but that's what I perceived when I was amongst them. That he's not like us. And so when you describe a being like that, that one is Akuj. But when you describe other things as far as rain, war, productivity of the land, Akuj is involved, but Akuj deploys other deities. So Akuj is supreme, Akuj is above, Akuj is far, Akuj is unreachable, Akuj is transcendent, Akuj is pretty much super. In other words, supernatural, So what we are discussing is incomprehensible, but is recognizable. What do I mean by that? That around us and within what we are trying to understand, there is that which we don't understand. And we're not the first ones. For example, in Acts 17, we are given a major record of a group of a pantheistic community, actually a polytheistic community, that believed in a number of deities, and they had a particular altar to an unknown God. And that's where Paul doesn't just take an opportunity to explain to them that the unknown God could be this God, but he tries to fit in their wrestling and say, I agree with you. You don't know, you can't comprehend, because the ones you know, you can attribute specific functions to them. And because we human beings are very functional and utilitarian in our understanding of things, that's why it's easier to know a God, these deities, as though they are cabinet ministers or specific, government entities, and then there is that one who is overall in all things, and that could be the God, if at all. Now, I have said many things to refer to the fact that this, what we would call concept or idea, for some is just a psychological crutch. We are unable to explain this, therefore, there must be a being that is great. We don't have a name for that God. Other people call that, rather, we don't have a name for that being. Many people call that being God. Maybe we can call the being God, all right? But that is the thing. That is what we're trying to wrestle with. We do not know until the Christian comes and tells us that in Christ, this God is revealed and known. and yet not comprehended, but known to an extent that can be related with. Now he's no longer a Kuj far away, but rather close, incarnate, relatable, knowable, So that is a huge difference with when we're discussing God. We move from a place of not knowing, we move from a place of just, functional deities to a place of we don't know, but we can see someone close to what we are grappling with, who embodies the love, the compassion, the wisdom, even the eternity that we imagine. Anyway, I didn't intend to complicate things, but that's my attempt at this. We are not dealing with a concept, but we cannot avoid conceptualizing.
Oludde nnyo mu budde bwange.
Ani oyo ate obadde bubuso mwami Kasumba ajja kukakana mukulu wange obadde ovuddeko tekinologiya agambye nti nze abayingira kati ngeriko okomyewo obudde kati bubunzo bwange buweddeko.
Gwe moderator.
Anti okuvaako gw'okulabye takulabye ye alowooza nti akyayogera.
Kazi wano beera kibagambe ba Luganda. Samson, you go ahead.
I don't know where you lost me, so I don't know where to pick you up.
Up yourself, not us.
So where was the last time I was live?
You were actually emphasizing the issue of comprehension vis-a-vis believing this infinite God.
Okay, fine. So yes, I was saying that one, we are dealing, when I use concept, I'm using it because I'm struggling to find how to explain something bigger than human language can capture, because the concept of God that we have, or the being that we are talking about, is incomprehensible and indescribable within most of what we have, which is finite. And I was making the point that, for instance, because human beings have a beginning, it is difficult to explain to them something that has no beginning. Because in our minds, when we try to capture lack of beginning, the human mind, because it has a beginning, will give you a beginning, but one very fine history. The human mind does not have the ability to capture the idea of zero beginning and zero end. Now, if you can't capture something that has no beginning and no end, how are you going to understand God other than take him in the realm of faith? So by faith, I believe that I am face to face with a beginning, with a being devoid of beginning and devoid of end to the extent I cannot even fathom or explain. God explains himself in ways that require us to believe, because there is no other way to go about them. But one of the other things that is very important, isn't it amazing that literally most human beings, whether they believe in the God you and I believe or not, each human beings have found the need for a being higher than themselves, whether that is Buddha or Shintoism or Mukasa. Somehow humans believe that there is something bigger than themselves that is not human. And out of all those, mine, the God I believe in, presents himself as superior to all those existing around, a concept I believe, before even we come to how he presents himself. So for me, I am comfortable with believing the idea that one, the God I have been introduced to, one, is devoid of beginning and devoid of end. And two, that he was involved in the process of creating human life. The two I'm explaining are all matters in the realm of faith before I even bring them to the realm of logic and explaining, because there's no other way to go about them. God is a matter of faith, because there's no other way I can explain how God is. I believe he is. I believe
Something.
he
There's a
created.
comment from Chris.
Yes.
He's saying believing in something beyond ourselves doesn't automatically translate to that being God. What do you have to say?
I am operating in the realm of faith, and there are very few things you can explain outside faith. I don't know how to put this. You see, how, for instance, you see, God is beyond explanation. I cannot find a logical way to explain to you, for instance, that God has no beginning and has no end, and what exactly that means in real terms. Or that God is. But what I can understand and try to explain to those who are willing to believe is that after you believe he is, and after you believe that being that is has revealed himself in realms that are finite, to an extent that finite humans can sort of capture. For instance, because even though I am a student and to a certain extent a teacher of that God, I am cognizant of the fact that what I explain is my understanding of him, but that understanding of God is not equal to all he is. And for me, that's a very important point. So when people say that, when God, those who have met him, use the concept of Father, I hope it is understood that the concept of Father does not capture everything he is. Because even if I said our Father, I don't know the people listening to me who have had different fathers, whether we capture the same idea. When I say our Father in heaven, I don't know what exactly is understood by a girl who was serially raped by her biological father. She will get a distorted view of the being I'm trying to explain. The man that had an absentee father that never paid his school fees, when we say our Father, that distorts the idea of what I'm trying to explain. So even the concepts of God we are using to explain, or God has allowed us to use to explain himself, depending on where you're coming from, distort exactly who he is, because they are limited and they work. So he is even bigger and better than the concept he uses to define himself. That's why in the experiences of those who have been with him, also known as the Bible, he will talk about himself as a shepherd. Then he realizes that can only deal with those who are animal herders. Then he will call himself a vine, because he understands the concept of shepherd does not really give a good picture to those who have cattle. And even if you are a keeper of cattle, if God said, I am a cow, what does the one with the long-horned cow get? Is it the same as the one with the Frisian cow? So we are struggling, and have been for some time, with finding appropriate illustrations to define a being so infinite and trying to explain to finite humans using finite illustrations. But either way, irrespective of the limitations, God has accepted that he's got to work with us. And that's why also he has allowed we, with our own weaknesses, to try and capture that complex concept that and being that he is. And by, as humans have developed, he has used from one generation to the next to try and explain as best as we can. I hope that sort of makes some sense.
A comment from Biamukama before you go.
Things more complicated, yes.
Comment from Biamukama before you go. Samson, do you define faith as easy believism that often stands contrary to evidence, or do you see faith as confidence and trust in someone built on proper evidence? So, in earlier on, you alluded to believing by faith. So, is that faith lack of evidence? Is that what you're alluding to, or complete trust and confidence that God actually exists? That was Biamukama's question about your
the challenge. Yes, the challenge I have is that the experiences of those before me with this God says that you go to him through faith. What exactly does faith mean? For me, faith means that I believe from the experiences of those before me that one, there is a God, and two, that of all the options of God that exists, the one that has been passed over to me is the most legitimate one to cast my ballot on. And that's why I'm casting my ballot on this one, as opposed to Mukasa, as opposed to Chiwanuka, as opposed to Buddha, as opposed to Shinto, and as opposed to Allah.
Thank you, Sam. Isaiah,
sazze kuddamu bibuuzo nazze kujjawo the oversimplification of something complex. Nze nina amawulire g'eggwanga bannange.
Soma amawulire sobo tweyanziza. There's a question I want you to respond to because I don't see any other hand up. From Chris, do you see it? We believe in ideas bigger than us all the time. Also, faith can be there without God. For example, as an unbeliever, I plan for tomorrow, even though I don't know it, I will be alive. That requires a certain faith that the assumption I've made that I will be alive will hold true. In this case, this has completely nothing to do with a God or someone like me. But still, I can have faith in that sense. Therefore, to that point, faith doesn't necessarily involve God in a spiritual way. What would you say, Isaiah, to that? Then I'll bring in maybe Tangazo.
Yes,
if you want to say something, please raise your hand or type in the chat. Those of you who have just joined. Yes, Isaiah.
I don't know that Tangazo
believing in something bigger than us, that doesn't necessarily have to be God. I think that is Chris's argument. It can be anything.
Moderator, before we go to Chris, okay. Two things very quickly. One, we should give considerations to Biamukama's message to Samson Kasumba. Number one. Number two, we should also understand where Samson Kasumba was coming from. And I think I should start with where Samson Kasumba comes from. Samson is saying, finite beings like us cannot explain the infinite God that we are talking about. Don't we agree on that?
That's true.
That is true, because the first lesson that we are taught in theology is that the subject matter is not here to be understood exhaustively. Is here to be believed, and we are going to collect information about him. So, when Samson says that for you to understand God, you need to believe him, he's right. Yes. And even that is what our manual says. Whoever comes to God must believe that there is God and they must believe him. That we agree. However, the same book explains faith as evidence and proof. And that is where Bikama comes in. And this balance is very important. Because this is the struggle that we have with the world, we Christians. This balance is very, very, very crucial and very important. And that is also where Chris comes in, because I normally challenge the secular world view when they are downplaying our faith and our belief in God. Because they say, the only answer you have is faith. The only answer you have is belief. We need facts. We need facts. Moderator, I would like to challenge the people who are present here and those who are listening. Is there anything that can be comprehended and understood without belief in participation? Because moderator,
disagrees in the chat. Go on.
when you sit in the laboratory and you're with that machine and you look into that telescope, I don't know how they call it. When you look through those lenses, what you see is what you believe. But are you sure? Or you are sure because of what you saw? At the end of the day, moderator, we need to believe our eyes. Otherwise, there won't be progress. Is anyone following?
So you're saying
Yes,
belief
sir.
is part of.
Yes, belief is part of comprehension, any comprehension. So these secular people should stop downplaying us when we say faith and belief. Because even in academia, you need to believe the professor. Most of us were taught by professors who actually came up with theories, and we believed those theories. Why did you believe those theories? Because we saw what they did. So we believed our eyes. So belief is part of the comprehension journey. So when we tell people, you need to believe God so that you can understand him better, we are not shutting the door of investigation. And in fact, that is why we are here. And that is where Samson, I think, was misunderstood. It was like he was closing this discussion. Why are you wasting time discussing something you finite beings cannot understand? No, it is our responsibility because we are conscious and volitional beings. We are different from the animal world. We are here to comprehend and investigate matters. And in fact, Samson Kasumba is my teacher of critical thinking at the university. So we apply these abilities on matters around us so that we can appreciate them better. However, we must be reminded that some things are for belief and others are for investigation. So, moderator, I have forgotten Chris's question as I give way.
So
But
Chris is basically saying,
yes,
faith isn't downplayed. It's being used in a misleading way. I guess his problem is slapping faith on everything we can't understand. I think that's where it's come. I hope I've represented
that accusation does not fall on us, we Christians. It falls on religions and other traditional beliefs. And I am speaking for myself. We are not representing those religions that slap faith on each and everything. Because you know very well, moderator, that we have always taught here at iTiS that we apply spiritual solutions to spiritual problems and apply physical solutions to physical problems. That is not slapping faith on everything. You don't start praying for malaria before you go to the hospital. That is an abuse of faith. You go to the hospital. Yes.
It is evidenced by our discussion this evening.
Thank you so much, by the way. We have this discussion because we're not just slapping faith on the matter of God. We are investigating this issue of God. Who is this God or what is this God? So that is not what we do. We Christians, but some religions do. But Chris is welcome to this Zoom and this audience. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you. Thank you, Isaiah. Tangazo, your hand has been up.
Like which religion is ever?
Wakajana wetusumbua.
Like Islam.
Olingo wedda wendi sebo wedda wendi okuba nazenga tontegera.
Kristo inomuyamba. I think first of all I want to I think for me my faith I think I should speak for myself and the way I understand faith. Faith is not necessarily, and it shouldn't be looked at as belief in the absence or irrespective of evidence. On the contrary, but faith is based on evidence. Even the idea that there are experiences or there are witnesses, as the Bible would describe them, a cloud of witnesses that have gone before us, that in itself is evidence. And for example, we're just on the back of celebrating Easter. And so Easter particularly celebrates. I was telling the guys on Sunday that Christmas was not a big day or holiday in the church calendar in the early church. Easter was the big day because it represented what exactly was the cornerstone, or let's say the foundation of the Christian faith. The belief in a resurrection. The belief in a resurrected king or lord or leader, if you would say, because then you see historically it has been investigated, it has been interrogated both by believers and non-believers, to the point that there are many things you have to explain around that story. Even if you were to dismiss it, at least consider certain aspects of what that story includes. Even what you call faith now, the fact that the people who first received this story were willing to give their lives for it, and they say that which we have seen, that which we have heard, that which we have touched, we proclaim. Okay? And by seeing, we know that Jesus reappeared to them, or appeared to them after his resurrection, having been crucified. But also they touched him to prove that he was not just a ghost or a spiritual being that just appeared to them. Now, evidence for faith then is not the belief itself, but there is the tangible, that the work that is going on in people, but also that which God has done and revealed in Christ. Paul himself, writing in Romans, and I liked where Samson began and said, okay, let's look at the Bible as a book or a collection of stories. Besides, I think both of you, Isaiah and Samson, have alluded to this. Let us first let's first leave it. Let's not call it a religious book. Let's first look at it as a record of a narrative or stories that have been told to us. What does it bring? Is it a piece of evidence? Besides calling it a religious book, is it a piece of evidence? All right. Once we see it as a piece of evidence, then our experiences are not primary evidence. No. They are somewhere on the spectrum of evidence, but there is primary evidence that cannot be taken for granted, that requires us to examine and believe. Unfortunately, in a country like Uganda, we are first told that we are Christians because we are born into hijackers communities, like apparently Christian families. So you're born in an Anglican church, they hijack you, they take you to church, they pour out on you, they give you a certificate, they tell you you're a Christian. And from that day, you're not supposed to question, you're supposed to quote unquote believe. No. Once we are older and we begin to investigate, whether away or towards, it is okay. It is okay for someone to come to faith through understanding. And then the faith in itself enables greater understanding. Then when we are having a question about God, for example, we believe, but also we know. Okay? So in the book of Acts, or in the Acts of the Apostles, you see constantly when, for example, Acts, I think it's 13, when the Samaritans want to worship Paul and Barnabas because they think the gods, Hermes and I think Zeus or someone, Hermes and Zeus, apparently they think they have come to them in form of humans. They tell them, no. We are not. Don't worship us. We are humans like you. But then they go on to explain this God who created everything, and this God who enabled many other things concerning life, including making their soils fertile and productive and giving them rain, among other things. Now, it is important that we have evidence. Even in Romans chapter 1, Paul points to the fact that there is a lot of evidence in creation that unless you can have another satisfactory explanation for, including ourselves, that evidence points, at least for Paul and others who already knew this God, points to this God. But if you don't know this God, then as you wrestle with how could this creation or this existence come to be, you're free to bring all your alternative theories or possible explanations, examine them in view of every other fundamental question of life. For example, now we are wrestling with origin, but origin alone is not enough. If you're going to make a comprehensive case, origin alone is not enough. You need to go, I think someone alluded to meaning as well somewhere. You're going to need to examine, of all the origins, which one explains meaning and purpose in life? Which one explains morality best? Okay, which one explains everything else, truth itself? Which one explains even end? How do things end? And then when you examine all of them, you need to be able to see a coherent case, not one that gives you an exciting beginning but cannot sustain through the question of meaning, morality, and the question of end. The question of purpose. Why are these things here? Is anything wrong in the midst of everything? Is, for example, if you were to use natural evolution or what Majitabatia, if you use the naturalistic explanation to say this is how we exist from naturalism, it's unsustainable. I think, as Isaiah asked, even just the question of intelligence, okay, alone, this is disturbing, okay. So faith in itself requires us to investigate, and there is a beginning evidence. Our experiences are being relative and subjective, let alone even those of the ones that were before us, should point somewhere. And I like the fact that we have documents like the Bible, but also we have documents like nature. Nature is a document in itself. It is a major piece of evidence, okay, among others. So yes, thank you very much. Let us ground our faith. Yes, let us ground our faith in evidence rather than use it as a way of suppressing evidence and inquiry.
Thank you, Tangazo. We have about 15 minutes, now 14. Obviously, this is just part one of our discussion. We intend to have other parts because we still have other questions about this God. Today, we've only attempted who or what, but then we have other questions like how is he distinct from all the other gods, which part we've attempted. The chat room is hot, I must tell you guys. Please go check it out.
Yeah. There is fire.
I wish one of those guys
Chris is running
put up there. Chris, can you speak? I would like to hear your arguments. Can you speak by any chance? You're making good arguments in the chat. I wish you could say them out loud for those who are following. Anyway, who wants to speak as we close? Tom, Ariong, you're the one who asked the original question. How are you feeling now about your question? Have you been helped?
Yes, I have been helped, but the issue of how to differentiate this God, that supreme being, from the myriad of deities we have around us, the likes of Mukasa, Vamweyana, Muanga. How do we differentiate? How do we identify? How do we know that now this is the supreme being? Because I think, to me, it is important for us to know that this is the supreme being, and these are the likes of Mukasa, Muanga, Musoke. I want that also tackled. The other one has helped me really, but this one, I need this one specifically to be handled.
Okay, I thought that was kind of handled, but yeah, if you need a direct answer.
Yeah,
maybe Biamukama wants to come in.
A little bit, because I don't think cultures there is any culture that is confused as to the creator supreme being. Every culture has no confusion like that. I think Reverend Raymond was mentioning about, the concept of the supreme being among the Karimajong. We have Katonda here, we have Ruhanga in Ankole, we have Akong to the Ngombe in DRC, we have Chido to the Jokun of Nigeria, we have the Khoisan and Khoikhoi who know him as differently, or Akamba, as the Akamba would have that concept, as in there is Lotuk in Sudan, there is a joke in, I think, among I think a joke would probably be the Achorio, but that every culture has the idea of the supreme being as distinct and different from what you would call guardians, the Mukasa Chivuka, Emandwa in some circles, over the Bachwezi in other circles. I don't think that confusion is ever existent in any culture. I was actually surprised when I was reading some mythological books of the Aboriginals of Australia to see actually that was as well the case. And so in the whole world, in traditional concepts of gods, in every culture and every tribe, that difference and distinction is pretty much clear. Now, what the Christian faith does speak is the fact that transcendent supreme being, who was considered to be distant, has actually revealed himself through Jesus Christ. That's the distinction it makes. It doesn't suggest that this is a completely new being altogether, which is why, again, when you consider the Bible translations in every culture, including our own, they did go about coining new names or new titles for the supreme being, because they didn't need to. That supreme being, if he is the creator of the whole universe, he certainly existed in every area of the universe, and he does. So that's I think, for me, there is no confusion as to that, and how we would know. We knew him. The question is whether we actually worshipped him as we should.
Okay, thank you, Biamukama.
Yeah. Thank you, Biamukama. I've gotten you. Yes, but the Bible talks of that supreme being, that supreme being has a furnace somewhere, Gehenna, hell. That supreme being has heaven somewhere. Now, here in Buganda, in Iteso, and in the Bagwere, where my mother comes from, these other deities, the Muangas, the Msokes, if you did well, they will appreciate you, they will reward you. If you did bad, they will punish you, equivalent to heaven and hell. Now, how do we differentiate this supreme being from Mukasa? Are there things that are distinctly of this supreme being, or what Mukasa can do if you disobeyed him, and this supreme being can also do, therefore this supreme being can be mistaken for Mukasa, or it is the same being but with different names?
I think you might be confusing two things. One, the knowledge of the supreme being in every culture, including your own, as distinct from the other gods. And two, how that supreme being relates, or at least was perceived to relate to creation. Those are two distinct things that I think you might be confusing.
Because my question was, Biamukama, how do we identify this supreme being? He's only one amidst Mukasa, Muanga, Musoke, Bamweyana, Mukama. He's one amidst all those ones. How do we identify him? Because it is very important for me to identify him, worship him, believe in him, and also follow him. That's the question. Because if Mukasa can panic me,
I may not be clear. As I mentioned, among the Baganda, you won't find any Muganda who will say Mukasa is Katonda. There is already an inbuilt distinction among the Baganda. The same case would be for the Banyankore. You won't find Ruhanga being mistaken or confused with a Mandwa. So the question of how do I identify him, I think that's not a question that you would come to if you actually paid attention to all the cultures as such. That question doesn't arise at all. So I think Reverend Raymond had mentioned the fact that there is the functional, you might call them deities or the functional guardians as such, who were believed to carry out the different activities on behalf of the Supreme Being. But the cultures that I've studied, and I've studied quite a number, you would find that they make, whether it's the Greeks, you would not find anyone who actually, or any god or any guardian, whether it's Athena, whether it's Poseidon, whether it's, Hermes, you won't find them being mistaken for Zeus. When they speak about the Supreme Being, in the Greek thought, you would be thinking of Zeus. In among the Romans, you would be thinking of Jupiter. And again, you could go to as many cultures and find that they were careful and able to distinguish between whom they considered to be the creator and supreme being and who were the principalities or other authorities that you might call gods in that sense, or guardians or intermediaries in every culture. So I think the question of how do I distinguish so I can never arose in ancient cultures because that distinction was very clear.
Thank you, Biamukama. We're quickly running out of time. Let me have Tangazo, then I think I'll go back to Isaiah. Tangazo, the chat is hot, guys. Go to the chat room. Tangazo.
Yes, I think it's very good that we don't go away. It's okay if we have not gotten full understanding, because at the end of the day, we are not discussing something new. Neither are we discussing it for the last time. But I think there are things we shouldn't miss, especially if we repeat them over and over again. That in our day and age, there is something called money. I have heard someone say, "Simbi oba sente ye katonda w'enseno," and they say it, but they know what they mean. It doesn't sound to be true, but if you examine it closely, you realize that there is a sense in which it passes off as true, because again, as human beings, utilitarianly, that is true. Because is there anything you want or need? If you have money, you should be able to get it. You don't need to pray. I'm currently working on something about miracles. How Ugandans largely, by and large, you are just miracle props. Mwe okutuuke okuva ewaka n'ogenda ku mulimu n'otambula mu kibuga n'odda ewaka ng'oli mulamu kyamagero. Not because si kyamagero oba kyetagisa kuba kyamagero. Imwe risks nyingi nnyo. Bode esobola okukuba, stray bullet esobola okukuba, that's one thing. But also, for you to go to a hospital and find a doctor available for you, and they treat you, and medicine available for you, and you get the good care, and you go out well, kyamagero, your miracle props. But that aside, if you have anything, if you're sick of malaria, musooka kusaba nga temunafuna ddagala, because you look at each other as a way of showcasing the possibility or the rampant possibilities of miracles. Why? Because for us as human beings, and particularly, I would speak for the African traditional worldview, is that there is functionality in our faith. Nti nzikiriza nti kino kijja kubaawo singa nkola A. If I do A, this will happen. If I don't do A, this will happen. But now we live by miracle. Wemba sikoze bulungi, I hope God will intervene, and God intervenes and you go home. So whether we exercise faith consciously or subconsciously, we are a people who exercise faith. The problem is we are confusing the what kati abasente kyabasaba sente omulokola akisaba Katonda. So always sente ye Katonda. But the scientist also, he will tell you very much. They will not confess it that they treat science or worship science as their quote unquote God, that they can appeal to the scientific instrument or apparatus to assure them of what they want. They can calibrate certain things scientifically and be sure of travel. They can be sure of healthcare. They can be sure of excellence in many ways, performance at work, and in a day and age of the discussion around God and deities is going to be more complicated, because even when it comes to wisdom, memory, abilities, we're going to be appealing to something called AI in the sense that it is also going to be a God, quote unquote, of its own. So utilitarianly, functionally, there is those things we appeal to as gods or beings, the gods of certain fields. But what we accept, as Yamuka has said over and over, many cultures, many people groups, many societies, many countries, whatever you call them, worldviews, will also be aware that there is a transcendent. And that conversation we are having now is a comparison between the transcendent and then the functional, of which, for me as a Christian, I know that the transcendent is also, if I may say, the functional, but it transcends my functional needs. That even if it does not meet my functional need transactionally, that even if it doesn't, he remains God and transcendent over my circumstances. Naye Mukasa bw'atakuwa balongo, ddungu ng'oyagala akuyambe mu kuyigga, ate simanyi ow'enkuba, tosobola twalira ebyoyagala ewa ddungu n'obitwalira Mukasa, ebyoyagala ewa Mukasa n'obitwalira ewa Musoke, ebyoyagala ewa Musoke n'obitwalira ewa Simanyani. You can't. But me, I can take all of these things to this one God.
Thank you, Tangazo. We're not going to go ahead. It's time up, guys. But this is just part one. On Monday, we'll be back here to go into part two of this discussion. I've loved the panel. I like the chat room. It's on fire. Guys, please come back. Chris and everybody. The link is the same. The passcode is the same. Okay. Every Monday and Thursday, we're here discussing such matters. I see guys are unmuting. What do you want to say at the end? Samson, what do you want to say?
The most violent in the chat room is teacher Imran.
Yeah, please, guys, come back on Monday. We'll have part two of this discussion. The link is the same. The passcode is the same. In the meantime, the God we've been talking about, the Supreme, keep you and bless you until we meet again. Bye-bye.